Welcome to the Untold Tales audio anthology Encore presentation, written and narrated by Dr. Jeffrey A. Robinson. Eugene Fitch Ware and Science Fiction Poetry of the 1880s. Eugene F. Ware was a pioneer, a soldier, lawyer, and poet. He was captain of Iowa troops in the Civil War. He settled in Kansas in 1866, homesteading a farm which his grandchildren still own. He lived long at Fort Scott and was an eminent lawyer and a fine businessman. Mr. Ware filled many public places in both state and nation, the last being Commissioner of Pensions under President Roosevelt. He is considered to be the greatest poet of Kansas. The growth of Kansas has been put into immortal verse by him. Mr. Ware died in 1912 and is buried in the National Cemetery at Fort Scott. He wrote several very memorable historical works about the Civil War, yet it is his poetry that stands out as unique for his era. His book, Rhymes of Ironquill, contains not only inspirational poetry about war and Kansas, but also some of the most beautiful science fiction poetry ever written. The following are examples of two of the more memorable poems from that volume. They were easily more than a century ahead of their time, and even though they were written barely after the Civil War, they are comparable to the best science fiction poetry of our era. The first is The Violet Star. "I've always lived and I always must," the sergeant said when the fever came. From his burning brow we washed the dust, and we held his hand and we spoke his name. "Millions of ages have come and gone," the sergeant said as we held his hand. "They've passed like the mist of the early dawn since I left my home in that far-off land." We bade him hush, but he gave no heed. "Millions of orbits I've crossed from afar, drifted as drifts the cottonwood seed. I came," said he, "from the violet star. Drifting in cycles from place to place, I'm tired," said he, "and I'm going home, to that violet star in the realms of space where I've loved to live and I will not roam. For I've always lived and I always must, and the soul in roaming may roam too far, and I've reached the verge that I dare not trust, and I'm going back to the violet star." The sergeant was still, and we fanned his cheek. There came no word from that soul so tired. A bugle rang from a distant peak as the morning dawned and the pickets fired. The sergeant was buried as soldiers are, and we thought all day as we marched through the dust, "His spirit has gone to the violet star, for he always lived and he always must." The next poem is called El Moran. Crossing the orbit of Valdebaran and 16 orbits to Taurus Row, as dashes a boat through a chain of whirlpools into a slumbering lake below. Thence, through 1,000 constellations, I came at last to an open place, and saw in the distance the waves of ether breaking in foam on the cliffs of space. Vacantly gazing, I felt a presence, a viewless presence without a word. A soul was beside me. I felt a question, nevertheless not a sound I heard. "Whence are you coming, and whither going, and who, I thought, can you really be?" An interval passed, as of hesitation, and this is the answer it thought at me. "Losing my life in a mine explosion a week ago on the planet Mars, I thought I'd look up a new location. Are you acquainted amongst the stars?" No, I replied. I was killed by lightning on yestermorn in Hindustan. I visit my old ancestral homestead back in the nebula El Moran. Both of us talked of the past and present. We watched the asteroids weaving lace and barrelin billows of surging ether pounding the limitless cliffs of space. Thank you for listening. As you know by now, we love our listeners, fans, patrons, and supporters. Please let us know what you think of our podcast and our stories. The best way to do that is to subscribe to our podcast at untold-tales.com. By doing so, you'll be added to our mailing list so you can be notified of upcoming episodes, blogs, and other information. Thanks again for listening, and have a great day.